All right, we should be recording.
Okay, good evening, everyone. This is Monday, December 14th. It's 2020 at 6 p.m. This is the St. Louis Park Public Schools Truth and Taxation hearing. This meeting is being held via Zoom due to the current pandemic and pursuant to Minnesota Statute 13D.021. We are going to first approve the agenda of this meeting, which is the Truth and Taxation hearing. Is there a motion to approve?
So moved by Karen.
Moved by Karen. Is there a second?
Second by Laura.
Thanks, Laura. Can you do the roll call, please?
Yes, Mary Tomback,
Aye.
Ann Casey,
Aye.
Karen Waters,
Aye.
Ken Morrison, Heather Wilsey,
Aye.
Colin Cox,
Aye.
Laura McClendon, aye.
Did I miss an aye by Ken? Did you hear it?
There was a
I
technical.
was on mute, I think.
Yeah, there was
Okay.
a technical issue. Some of it
Aye.
was balanced on mute.
All right,
You got it?
passes 7-0. Thank you. And before I pass the reins over to Patricia Magnuson, Director of Business Services. Mr. Butler, I think you're the only member of the public here right now, but others may join us throughout the meeting. So let me just say that after Patricia gives some of her background information, we will of course allow public comment. If you do want to speak, please just use your raise hand feature on in your Zoom board interface here, I'm sorry. And I will of course call on you, give you opportunity to speak. I will manage speaking times of all of those who want to speak as best I can. Our school board meeting, regular business meeting, is scheduled to start at 6:30, and we will do our best to accommodate that timing, but of course want to make sure that everyone who wants a chance to speak has an opportunity to do so. So with that, Patricia, please go ahead.
Good evening, everyone. This is the public hearing for taxes payable in 2021, and you're seeing my screen. Can I get a thumbs up? Okay, great.
Yes.
So tonight is a requirement in state law that we hold this meeting as is designated here after 6 p.m. or later. It can be part of a regularly scheduled meeting, and we have to allow for public comment. And in the presentation tonight, we have to talk about the current year's budget and our proposed property tax levy, and that's what we have on the agenda. And then we'll have, as we said, time for public comment at the end. Sort of an overarching theme of the tax levy is that it's one of the main components of public funding in Minnesota. And part of our state constitution is that a uniform system of public schools is set up and that the legislature makes provisions by taxation or otherwise to secure that system. So this is part of the constitution of the state of Minnesota. So as a result, as you would expect, funding is highly regulated, and the state sets all of the formulas that determine our revenue. The state sets tax policy for our schools and the maximum authorized property tax levy. And the state also authorizes the school board to make requests through public vote for referendums for operations or some capital needs for voter approval. But a thing that's very important and is sort of non-intuitive is that the tax levy doesn't mean that there's a change in the budget. So there's four sort of reasons for that. One is the tax levy is based on state funded formulas set through state law or through voter approval. That's how the levy is set. So some increases in taxes are revenue neutral. So they're offset by a reduction in state aid. We call those equalized levies, where the formula is set, like in number one, but in number two, the state then says, here's how much of that formula will come from state aid, here's how much from property taxes. So it doesn't change revenue at all. The expenditure budget is limited then within those state formulas voter approved levies or within fund balance. So an increase in taxes doesn't mean necessarily that spending would increase, which is the final point there. And it's also important to note if a taxpayer goes to different tax hearings of different taxing jurisdictions, the city and county have a budget year that coincides with the calendar year. So taxes payable in 21 will fund the 21 calendar year budget. But for schools, because we run according to the school year, our fiscal year runs from July 1 through June 30th. So we are providing with this tax levy for taxes payable in 21 tax revenue for next school year. That doesn't start till July 1st. So the budget we'll be talking about tonight will be the current year's budget because we have not finalized yet next year's budget. So our school district budgets, I'm going to just talk a little bit now about our school district budget information. So these are all the different budgets that the school district gathers and separates according to state law, revenue and expenses. And the ones that are highlighted in orange are the ones that have a tax levy associated with them. So the general fund, community service fund, and debt service are the only three. The food service fund, for instance, has state aid and fees that families pay for meals, but there is no tax levy associated with that. This is an overview of the budget. I'm not going to spend a ton of time on this, but you can find this. This is required under state law, and you can find this on our school district website. This is a requirement in this same exact format that budgets have to be presented to communities across the state of Minnesota. And you can see that for the current year that we're in, our general restricted fund balance, for instance, at the top, we start with the beginning balance of, this is restricted funds, so capital related for the most part, technology, $5.9 million fund balance. And then as you move across on that top line, you see revenues and expenditures, ending with a $5.8 million fund balance. So that's how this document itself is to be read. But here's just an overview of some of the big parts of the budget. So I'm just going to flip back real quickly. You can see going down the left side, all the different funds. So this pie chart then breaks down all of the funds by their revenue sources. And as you can see, the general fund is by far the largest fund of the school district. It's for the general operations of the school district, required to be separate from the school nutrition fund, from the community service fund, that has community education, early childhood, family education, those types of things, separate from the building construction fund, and separate from the debt service fund. And again, of these three, the general, the community service, and the debt service are the only three that have tax revenue associated with them. So now we're just going to take that biggest part and talk about the general fund. That's where most of the revenue and expenditures occur. This first chart breaks down the revenue of the school district by revenue sources. So you can see in the title that we have about $68 million, almost $69 million of revenue in the general fund. 65% of that comes to us through state aid. Mostly, well, it's all in specific formulas, the main one being just the general funding formula. Property taxes live within that local, the blue piece of the pie, $21 million. About 20 million of that for this current year is the local source of property tax levy. The other $1 million is, the majority of that is investment earnings on the cash that we hold. So that's the revenue budget. On the expenditure side, this first picture breaks it down by what we call object, or it's sort of type of expenditure. As is the profile for public schools, the majority of our spending is made up of salaries and employee benefits, that blue and orange. About, oh gosh, nearly 80% of the revenue of our expenditures are on salary and benefits. The majority of those salaries being teachers' salaries. Another big portion is in purchase services. We are a district that outsources transportation. That's one of the main purchase services that we purchase. There's also other purchase services like tuition and other things like that. supplies, materials, capital expenditures, and then the small amount of other. This is a different way of looking at expenses, broken down instead by program. So a different type of way of looking at expenditures. And these are consistent across the state so that school districts can be compared to one another. Within state law, we have to report in these two ways, our expenditures. The thing you'll want to notice is the big gray piece of the pie, along with the green and the blue, are really tightly around education. The majority of this budget is directly right inside classrooms, as well as you could probably say instructional support in that same area. So all things that happen directly in the classroom. Pupil support services are things like transportation, things that get children to school. And then of course we have our sites and buildings, our custodial team, light and heat, and all of those things that keep our buildings running. And then there's about 4%, 4.8% in administration, and then district support services like human resources, business office, things that payroll, those kinds of things. So that's the breakdown of the budget, the majority being in classroom instruction. So now I'm going to move on to our property taxes payable in 2021. So I'll talk a little bit about the levy itself, how it was determined, any reasons for changes from last year into this year, and then the tax impact of those changes. So just a little bit of background, every owner of taxable property pays property taxes to all kinds of taxing jurisdictions, and the school district is one of them. And so it's wherever your property is located that you own, that's the school district that you pay property taxes in. Each taxing jurisdiction sets its own levy separately. So we are separate from the county, Hennepin County. We're separate from the city of St. Louis Park. And there's often limits set in state law. We talked a little bit about school district limits. So the county sends out the bills and manages all the collection of taxes and then distributes funds back to the taxing jurisdictions. And we talked a little bit about this actually in our previous meeting about the audit for school district, for most taxing jurisdictions. Property taxes are paid out twice a year in May and October. This is an example of what a property tax statement looks like. You can see a thing to pay attention to for a taxpayer is what's happening with your valuation in step one. Because if the valuation of the property increases or decreases, that will have an impact on the results for your particular property. But you can see there's county and city taxes and school district taxes on a property tax statement. And we are just talking about school district taxes tonight. So what happens with the school district tax levy? We put information together throughout the summer working with the Department of Education. There's about 40 categories, 40 funding formulas that property taxes are one of the sources of revenue. So there's maximums that are either set through voter approval or set through formulas that are in state law, and those are all set and regulated by the Department of Education. So there's some specific steps, but one of the things we want you to notice and know is that only one of those 7 steps in setting the property tax levy are really controlled by the school district. And by control, it means the school board gets to approve them. It really doesn't, the steps do not really give boards any local control over the amount of the spending, unless you count voter approval being one of those places where the board does get to make the decision to put something on the ballot. But it starts with the city and the county assessor setting the market values for the district and for each individual property. The legislature in its session sets property tax formulas and tax capacity formulas really around the taxing. The county auditor calculates then another formula for tax capacity. And then in step 4, the legislature is also setting the funding formulas. So not only are they setting tax law, how property taxes are assessed among different types of properties. But then in step 4, they're also setting the funding formulas. And then the county auditor, once the levies are set, is dividing the levy among each of the property owners. And then the school board, I'm going backwards. The Department of Education calculates the levy. It actually does sort of go in 2 separate directions there. But the school board adopts the final levy, and then finally the county auditor is determining the final levy. The county auditor has to step in twice, once for the preliminary statements, truth and taxation statements that come out to property owners in November, and then finally, you'll get your final statement in January after final property taxes are set. So the orange circled, or the orange outlined step here, number 6, is where the school board really has a stake in this, and that's when the board sets the preliminary levy in September, and then tonight when we make final decisions. But really, all the way the taxes are levied and set, and the formulas for our funding are all set by other jurisdictions. Here's what's been happening with our property tax levy to lead us up to tonight. So back on September 8th, the Department of Education gave us our first glimpse of what property tax formulas looked like for this school year. And then on September 29th, this school board approved the preliminary levy so that the proposed property tax statements could come out. That announced tonight's meeting and hearing to talk about these proposals. On November 23rd, we did hold another meeting with the board to just preview what you'll be hearing tonight, so that the board would be fully aware and feel comfortable in a position of making a decision later tonight after the public has a chance for input. And we have now our public input and our hearing tonight. And then following the hearing tonight, the board will certify the final levy amounts during the regular board meeting. So overall, our property tax levy for taxes payable in 2021 is increasing by less than $500,000, $384,539, or 1.17%. So we'll just go through a few of those. These next 3 may be familiar slides. There's a slide of the line items within each levy, and we're not going to go through each one of them, or within each fund. I'm not going to go through each one of them, but I want you to just sort of eyeball the ones that are in orange. We'll talk a little bit more in detail about those. The operating referendum, capital projects, we'll talk about them later. But in the general fund, if you go to the bottom, that tax levy is actually declining for general operations. So keeping in mind that this is the first marker for general fund revenue for next school year. The next fund is the Community Service Fund. It's basically flat. In community service, we'll talk a little bit more about ECFE and school-age childcare later, but because it's such a small levy, that small dollar amount does amount to a 4% increase within that fund. Then in the Debt Service Fund, these levies are really set by voter approval. They're set long ago by debt service schedules that were planned for. And so this is based on our debt service schedules that were established. And we'll talk a little bit more in particular about the LTFM debt service levy. So this just is a big overview. So within the general fund, again, you can see that dollar levy has increased, or has actually declined from last year. Community Service Fund has gone up just slightly, and the Debt Service Fund has gone up by about $1 million as planned. So for an overall, for all 3 funds, property tax levy increase of $384,539, or 1.17%. We added below the line just to break down between the voter approved and the other tax levies. So of that 384,000, 190,000 was an increase in voter approved levies, and about the other half of that, 194,000, are in other levies. So we'll just start going through some of those line items. In the general fund, the biggest levy is the operating referendum, and that is a voter approved amount, and that levy has actually declined, or will be declining for taxes payable in 21. By 728,000, and that levy is used to pay just general operating expenses. pays for salaries of classroom teachers, that type of thing. This is a voter approved and it's an enrollment driven formula. So because of enrollment declines coming into this fall, we made an adjustment in this referendum levy for this year so that we wouldn't have levies floating up and down with big adjustments from one year to the next. Because if we overestimate or underestimate enrollment, the tax levy will be adjusted in a future year. So we're only paid for precisely the number of students that we are educating. So that's the operating referendum. The next one is operating capital has gone up by about $100,000. We talk about this one because it's a different kind of funding formula. It's one that's equalized. So really not much has happened to this formula itself. Our overall revenue and operating capital won't change, but the equalization has changed, meaning that state law requires more of this formula to be paid through property taxes so that less comes through state aid. So it's just a shift from one sort of pocket to the other, so to speak, in that funding formula. The next in the general fund, there is an increase of $213,000 for our capital projects levy. We refer to it as the technology levy because it funds our technology program in the district. And it pays for operating costs associated with technology. And it is based on a voter approved tax rate that's applied to the tax base. Because the tax base in St. Louis Park is increasing, that tax rate that the voters approved will generate additional revenue. And this year it's about $213,000. And that is exclusively for technology related items as approved by the voters. The next, this page goes between the debt service fund and the general fund, just the idea of long-term facility maintenance, which is a board-approved item that helps us to fund deferred maintenance projects across the district. In the general fund, that levy is going down by $163,000 because one of the things we have done is moved toward a bond issue a couple of years ago so that we could begin to decline the direct impact on the general fund and instead fund through debt service that is board approved. And that's used exclusively for facilities maintenance, roofing projects, indoor air quality projects, parking lots, sidewalks, those types of things. Every single project must be state approved every single year for long-term facility maintenance. And it's financed, as we said, between general fund levies or bond issues. And what we have done over many years in St. Louis Park is coordinate all of these levies so that we can maintain a level tax rate for these types of levies for long-term facility maintenance and other facilities levies. Next, then we're into the community service fund. The early childhood levy has gone up just slightly, $3,400. And not because it's significant, is it here, but it's because it's one of those formulas to point out that this is a formula that's based on the number of 0 to 4-year-olds in the district. So it's a totally different kind of funding formula. There was a very slight increase in the student count for 0 to 4-year-olds that led to this very minor increase in that levy. And we also have school-age childcare. That levy has gone up by about $38,000. And this is used to pay for the costs of our school-age care, which is our before and after school care called Kids Place, specifically the cost to serve students who are in that program that have disabilities. And this is a levy that, again, is very different. It's based on actual expenses for serving students with disabilities. And it really just changes based upon student need. So those are the line items that we wanted to highlight. And again, we just want to make sure that everyone understands that there's a lot of factors that change an individual property owner's taxes. It could be the change in the property value of the individual property. It could be because the value of properties across the entire district changes. That affects some of the levy formulas like the capital project levies. It also affects the denominator of our tax rate, which also impacts other formulas. And also levies and property tax amounts might change because of all those different types of funding formulas that we just walked through. The next slides, I just want to give you a little explanation of what you'll see. So we're going to look at examples of changes in the school district portion. Again, this is just the school district portion of property taxes for 4 years, from 2018 to 21. Again, school district only. And these do contemplate an increase in property value. I live in Hennepin County, and my property value did not go up this year, strangely. So this would not be my experience, but for those whose properties increased sort of on average, that's what these slides represent. They're preliminary estimates based on the 2021 tax levy, and they were prepared by Ehlers and Associates. They are our financial advisor, our municipal financial advisor. So this is a lot of data. We'll have a little more precise for a few individual property values in the next slides. But what I want you to notice is that if you go all the way to the right, the change in taxes from taxes payable in 20 to 21 in almost every, well, in every case for residential homestead is a decline, even with that average increase in value of property. Commercial industrial property is governed, has a different taxing formula that sets its tax capacity. So the tax percentages hit commercial industrial property a little bit differently than residential property. Here's a few just individual examples. Whoops, sorry about that. For a $200,000 home from last year to this, from this year to this next year, about a $4 decline in school district property taxes for that $200,000 home. That has increased in value about on average. Again, you can see a $300,000 home going down by about $7. And here we are with a $500,000 home going down just a little bit more than that, $15. And then this is $1 million commercial industrial piece of property, has a very slight increase in property taxes. So our next steps are, we'll take some public comment here tonight, and then the board will accept the public comments on the levy and then certify the tax levy during its regular board meeting later tonight. So now we have some time for public comments.
Thank you very much, Patricia. Since again, I think you're the only one on here, I'll just go ahead and ask directly. Mr. Butler, would you like to comment?
Hi, yes, thank you for letting me comment. I guess I have more questions than a comment, and I'm not sure if this is the appropriate forum for that, but I'll ask them anyway, and you can address them here. You can address them at your meeting, the regular meeting. I had two main questions. One is in the big pie chart that was shown early in the presentation, there was a split between what was classified as administration and what was classified as district support. And I'm curious about the difference between those two things, because they both feel very administrative to me, but perhaps there's a difference that I'm not aware of. The other thing I would be interested in is if you know what the practical effect will be of the decrease in the general fund levy amount. Is there one? Does that affect the budget in other ways? Does that trickle down to affect actual programming or not? With those two things, I appreciate the information. Thank you very much.
Sure, thank you very much. Patricia, I think you can probably answer those.
Yeah, the first question is, I think you're right. I would agree with you that that's sort of a way to think about administration. The reason it's broken down is because the Uniform Financial Accounting and Reporting Standards, our UFAR standards, require districts to report them. Administration is really a combination of site administration and district administration principles, and then superintendent's office. And support services are more district office types of support for the buildings, like payroll and human resources and communications, that type of thing. So that's the difference. I think it's fair to say that they are both administrative type categories. And then the second question, yeah, sometimes there's not a practical impact on the budget. I think there will be this year. As you can see, there's a decline in the operating referendum due to our decline in enrollment this year. So yes, for sure, just like other enrollment-driven formulas, our decline in enrollment this year, as is the case in many school districts right now, this decline in operating referendum in the general fund will have an impact for declining revenue. And we'll have to adjust our expenditures accordingly for next year.
Just certainly more additional conversations that are happening behind the scenes. But Mr. Butler, did you have anything else?
I did. I forgot one other question, and that is that, again, at the beginning, you said that there were certain areas of the budget that were sort of walled off from the levy funds. The levy can only go to X, Y, and Z. One of them that I recall was walled off was food service. Am I remembering that right? And if so, is that a decision? Is that based on some state or federal regulation, or is that a decision that St. Louis Park has made?
Thank you. That's a good question. So it's just in state law, the only 3 funds that school districts can levy within are the general fund, the community service fund, and debt service. There's no mechanism to levy for revenue within any other fund. So it's a matter of state law. We have other ways of receiving revenue in those other funds, and the tax levy is just not one of those methods for those funds.
Okay, that was all my questions. Thank you very much.
Thank you so much for coming tonight, Mr. Butler. And I'll make a general plug to anybody, for you and anybody who may be watching this later, is that for any of the members of our community who are interested in the finances of the district, Dr. Magnuson facilitates the Financial Advisory Committee, where we are very anxious and grateful for public participation. Members of our community who are interested know expertise or experience in financial management is required whatsoever. There are a wide swath of members of our community who participate on that committee that meets several times throughout the school year and advises Director Magnuson, the superintendent, and the board on various financial matters. Patricia, I don't know if you want to add anything to that, but I'm sure you're always looking for people, right?
Yes, we always be happy to have people. We have a great group of community members and students, and we meet about once a month between October and March.
So Director Magnuson's information is on the website. Please just feel free to reach out to her or to any member of her staff you may know, and they'll get you connected with that. So again, thank you very much, Patricia, and to your team, Brooks and Yuki, and again, Mr. Butler, for coming tonight. With that, I'll take a motion to adjourn so that we can move on to our regular meeting.
So moved by
This is
Karen.
Ann.
Moved by
sorry.
Karen, or sorry, moved by Ann, second by Karen. Laura.
Mary Tomback,
Aye.
Ann Casey,
Hi.
Karen Waters,
Aye.
Ken Morrison,
Aye.
Heather Wilsey,
Aye.
Colin Cox,
Aye.
Laura McClendon, aye.
That passes 7-0. I'll see you all on the other Zoom link in just a second.